Now, we do a podcast every week, and we've said this for the last few years, which is that it's self-imposed marriage therapy. So we are forced on a weekly basis to sit down with one another and have conversation.
That's awesome.
And we oftentimes end up, stuff comes up, that Mac didn't know it's usually the way it is. Mac didn't know I was dealing with. Mm-hmm. And so we'd have to stop the podcast and have a conversation about that. And so I do think that that's fostered communication between the two of us, which I think feeds over into the lives of the kids. And I feel like now one of our children is here and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but that we've tended to be very open about you can ask us pretty much anything. Nothing is off the table.
Yeah, that's awesome.
When it comes to anything, any conversation is available. I kind of grew up with a mom that was very much if you brought up certain subjects, she would this is not a joke.
Same with me.
Run out of the room. My mom ran out of the room one time when I asked her a particular question.
Okay.
Yes. And so as growing up, I was I never wanted my kids to feel that way. And I've told them from a very young age, you have any question about anything, it doesn't matter how weird it is, you can come and ask me. And I do think your kids, I think you can think that they know that, but oftentimes, especially with boys, you actually have to say it out loud.
So here's what I just want to say what you said back, and you tell me if I misunderstood it, because I totally agree. Your relationship with your spouse and having communication and that loving, open relationship with your spouse is more important than your relationship with your children from a vocational standpoint,
Heck
right?
Yes.
Yeah,
100%. I think that's something we forget.
Your vocation is to your spouse
exactly.
and to your children.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's something, Angie, my wife and I have had that conversation multiple times lately of, hey, listen, I know that there's 1,000 different things that we need to handle right now, but what's more important is me and you sitting down and having a 30-minute, how are we doing? Let's talk about this. Let's dig into that. Yeah. And then the second thing you said, which I think is huge, and as somebody who works with a lot of young people, a lot of high school and college age, young men in particular, I bring this up a lot, but is that communication piece and your child not being terrified to talk to you because of the awkwardness. I gave a talk a couple years ago called Love Your Kids Enough to Make Them Hate You. And what it said, basically the premise of it was, have these conversations with your kids, even though it's going to be awkward and it's going to be uncomfortable and they're going to think, oh my gosh, I can't believe Dad's saying this. Oh my gosh, I can't believe Mom's saying this. Because it goes a long, long way. And they're going to grow up and not in 30 years, but in 5 years say, so glad that I could have those conversations, unlike my friends who were confused and learned all these things from all the wrong people in all the wrong places.
And it's not necessarily that you have to, at every dinner table conversation, remind your children, remember, honey, you can ask me anything. That's going to weird people out. Right. So I got these two things going on in my mind at once. One is a lot of them being feeling comfortable enough to approach you is about you bringing up those things that are on the edge of polite conversation. Mm-hmm. Naturally, you not being afraid to broach those topics when they're young,
right? Not
to be weird about it, but just to let them know that that's in the span of conversation that we have in the house. And you may have to say, as we have often done with our youngest, this is not something you talk about at school, buddy. Okay, we've had a great conversation here and we all feel very comfortable, but don't talk about this at school. It's not a secret. It's just other families don't necessarily talk like we do. If
my child is 16, 17 years old and I have not had that kind of a relationship with them, any advice on how I create that kind? Because I can see that, I've talked about this on the show. My son, we've read the Good Pictures, Bad Pictures porn book, and I've used the word pornography, and we've talked about all the stuff, all the sensitive stuff. And that's been pretty easy because we started those conversations when he was 7 years old about this, that, and the other. I can see it being a lot more uncomfortable with my 17-year-old that I've never broached any of these topics with, sitting down and saying, let's talk about the church's moral issues of contraception.
That's when they're gonna smell. It's not necessarily that they smell a fake. Right. It's that's a fake version of our normal interaction.
But if I'm in that position right now, let's say that I'm in that position right now, any advice, any thoughts on how I can sort of mend or heal or create that type of relationship with my older child or young adult child?
I would say start out by being honest and saying, I really should have done this sooner.
Yeah. Right. Sure.
Now you've just opened a door. And you've put it on yourself too. And I think as a parent, whenever I am honest and in an act of humility, that also is a teaching moment as well.
Right.
So I would use it as a teaching moment and say, you know, I did the best that I knew what to do at that time, but I realized that this was an area that I missed talking to you about.
I will say in that same vein, I'm in my mid-30s, and I've had my parents a couple times in my life say, hey, I'm really sorry that I didn't do that. We really should have talked more about that. And that's like the most
So huge.
Yeah.
It's the biggest deal to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And not only that, I'll give you one more level to that dynamic. Is if you can say to your son, you know, and with dudes, they say, you know, dudes talk shoulder to shoulder while they watch something.
Right.
Or they do something together.
Sure.
Women talk face to face while they drink coffee. You know? But if you can say to your son, you know what I never had with my dad is the ability to talk about so and so.
Right.
And if you've never had that with your son, that will click.
Yeah.
He will understand what is happening.
That's huge.
He will go, well, no duh, man. I've never been able to talk to you about that.
Well, and for the record, just if anybody's listening, they need to hear this. It's going to be super awkward and uncomfortable to repair or build that kind of relationship.
Yeah.
And that's okay because your kids are worth that.
Yeah, that's
100%.
right. 100% worth it. It's true.
Well, I don't know.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching this clip. If you enjoyed what you're seeing here, make sure you go and watch the whole video. Down below, make sure you like and subscribe and share it with anybody else who you think might be interested.